So for those unaware, we just had a ton of great changes announced for Black Ops 6 Zombies. And a common thing with a lot of these changes is that they're centered around the difficulty of zombies. Now, there's a ton of stuff we need to talk about, not just regarding these new changes and how they're going to affect the game as a whole, but also the drama beforehand and how we should actually address the difficulty of zombies moving forward. And I want to talk about this comment I got recently real quick, as it's something I was able to test and it was genuinely pretty much right on the money. With 𝘾𝙤𝙢𝙢𝙪𝙾 saying that people complain about the score streak drop rate and weapons not doing enough damage, but honestly, if not for the boss spam, this would genuinely be like old zombies where we relied on traps and infinite damage wonder weapons to get us through those rounds. And going off of this, with the addition of the hand cannon we got in Black Ops 6 Zombies recently, you've got 10 shots and it will one-shot Manglers if you shoot them in the cannon on any round. I was genuinely able to finally experience those higher rounds without having to deal with 6 Manglers shooting at me and having to dump a whole mag into every single one of them. And when I was able to do that, it really just felt like old zombies. I wasn't even subconsciously thinking about what I was doing. I was just running a horde around, shooting into them, proccing the ammo mod, which would kill a giant part of the horde, and then I would run the rest of them through a trap, and then I would go to the crafting table and craft some equipment and use stuff like monkeys and 𝘾𝙤𝙤𝙀 devices, as well as the wonder weapon I had to kill the zombies. And being able to finally play this game without the annoying Manglers just shooting at you, it made me realize that literally you can just run a horde up, shoot into it with an ammo mod, and kill the zombies or run them through a trap, but you're not able to do that when there's so many Manglers because you have to focus them, or else they will all hit you with the tracking shot and instantly kill you. The addition of the hand cannon in this strategy alone had completely changed the way I think and feel about difficulty in Black Ops 6 Zombies. Genuinely, my enjoyment went from like a 3 on the high rounds to like a 7 or an 8. And I think with these nerfs coming in, I think it's going to make that strategy even more viable. Maybe you don't even have to rely on the hand cannon, and you can legit just use your weapons and equipment, wonder weapon, trap, just play zombies normally and not have to rely on a score streak strat like you used to. And so even with these changes, a lot of people are still going to complain wanting an easier experience in zombies. And you know, I'm all for a casual easy mode being on the side, but here's the thing, zombies has always been difficult. Even back in the days of World at War, getting around 30 was like, holy shit, it was something impressive. But now pretty much anyone can do that because we've been playing these maps on these games for the better part of a decade. So now when you go back to something like World at War, you know exactly how to get points, you know exactly where the perks are and which ones to buy first. You know what guns are the best, which ones suck. You know what camping spot and training spot are the best. These are all things that you learn with time that you didn't know back in the day. So now when you go back to those maps, they're going to seem like an easier, more casual experience, even though they never really have been. You know, achieving something like a high round should be something that's impressive. And we've only had one game that is an exception to this, with that being Cold War Zombies. And it's exactly that. It's an outlier, and not necessarily what Zombies is or what it should be. But here's the thing, we've had an easy mode in the past, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 4. If it's a side optional mode, who cares? But honestly, we might not even need that easy experience anymore, as we kind of already have it with directed mode. And while the rounds don't progress, the game in directed mode is pretty chill and kind of reminds me of Cold War Zombies, or even like hopping back into a map I've already mastered from like 10 years ago. You can pretty much just plop down in any corner with any gun and just kind of chill. And honestly, I feel like rather than an easy mode, this kind of encourages people to not just stick to it, but to actually try to get better and move on to that standard mode, which will then feel rewarding when they can finally say, hey, I made it to round 30. It's like my mom, my dad, my sister, they've all hopped into directed mode to kind of check out Black Ops 6 Zombies, and it's been a great place for them to kind of check it out and learn how the mode works. And hell, I even enjoy hopping into it from time to time with the boys, you know, to just mindlessly vibe, buy stuff, be super OP, and just goof around. And going off of this, another big thing I've seen in the community as a whole, kind of regarding the difficulty in the Mangler spam specifically, is that the Liberty Falls hate ruined Black Ops 6 Zombies. And essentially this stance is that the hate that Liberty Falls had before launch surrounding the difficulty of the game caused Treyarch to just Mangler spam, as that was the only way to make the game harder. In general, people were not just upset and complaining just because Duke Dennis got to round 50 on his first try. It's because something like that happening directly contradicts what we were outright told in prior marketing material beforehand, that they were trying to make this game harder, and that it was going to be a difficult round 100. And going off the point that the Mangler spam was the only way to make the game harder, it's just not the case, because look at all the other changes Treyarch actually made to the game themselves that helps increase that difficulty, like reducing the insane ammo count that loadout guns had from the initial gameplay by about like 30%, increasing the zombie speeds on lower rounds, increasing those horde sizes, making those specialist field upgrades take a lot longer to charge compared to prior iterations, making armor a wall buy and having it cost a lot of points. You can only pick 2 upgrades per item instead of 5 at once, once. They removed the persistent class upgrades that gave you stuff like more critical damage. One of the biggest changes is that 𝘿𝙤𝙤𝙢𝙮 no longer spawns until after round 25, with a good chunk of these actually coming as a direct response to our feedback based on Liberty Falls. And honestly, if anything, the game is as good as it is now due to the corrections Treyarch had made, both in response to 𝘾𝙤𝙤𝙢𝙀 Zombies and the Black Ops 6 initial reveal. But hey, if we do want to point fingers at who's to blame for the Mangler spam problem, it's Treyarch, because they actually just admitted it. And the thing is, I genuinely think they have a great reasoning as to why they even did it in the first place. So on the COD pod, the head of Zombies, 𝘾𝙤𝙢𝙢𝙀, had also stated in response to the Mangler spam problem that they wanted to overcorrect the difficulty, as it's way easier to pull back than it is to patch things in to make it harder after the game is out.
You always want to start really hard. It's a lot easier to pull it back than it is to just make things harder.
And I genuinely couldn't agree more with this in a game design sense. As if they did do it the other way around, people would just bitch and complain every single time they quote-unquote nerfed fun, even if it was completely broken and changing it made the game better overall. And while I do agree with this should have been something tested in the beta state it was in at COD Next. That overcorrection should be made from the very start of the game. And this just goes to show that we truly do need an open beta for Zombies, where all the players can actually test things like the Mangler spam, so that can be resolved before the final game is even in our hands. And so as I touched on earlier, the Mangler spam is not the only way to increase the difficulty of Black Ops 6 Zombies, although it is the easiest to do, which usually isn't the best answer. So how do we actually make Zombies harder without something artificial like boss spam? You could further reduce the reserve ammo on loadout tier weapons, make tier 1 armor a wall buy that costs points instead of spawning in with it, make specialists something that only refills on a full power, increase ammo prices for unpack-a-punched weapons, increase the amount of damage zombies deal before round 10 to 50 instead of 30, hiding the map until after you've actually gone and unlocked pack-a-punch, making loadouts a wall buy or having them in a weapon locker that has to be purchased with points or salvage, limit the amount of armor you can hold in reserve to match the armor tier level you currently have, and just reducing the amount of get out of jail free cards. Like removing the invincibility frames you get, so instead of just running into a horde of zombies and being invincible for 5 seconds, you would have to make sure you're actually in a safe spot before ever even using it. And so with all this said, the issue that everyone seems to misunderstand regarding difficulty, even including Treyarch at times, it's that the early rounds need to be harder, not the later rounds. Genuinely, the high rounds themselves have never really been that hard. It's more about endurance and strategic setup rather than the actual round difficulty. World at War through Black Ops 2, you just get a wonder weapon, use that to kill zombies, you use equipment like monkeys and 𝘰𝙤𝙀 devices, and use a point gun to get money for traps to then kill zombies. Black Ops 3, you run trains around, proc an ammo mod, use the wonder weapon to kill zombies, use traps. In some maps like Revelations, the strat is literally just sit in the corner with the wonder weapon. In Black Ops 4, the strategy is also to sit in the corner. In Cold War, the strategy is also to sit in the corner. And so think about this, literally one of the hardest round 100s ever, only finally being completed earlier this year. You'd think you'd have to be getting spammed with Mangler shots, hands are spawning out the ass, the player just being swarmed with zombies at every turn. But no, the strat was to actually just rebuild the barrier and turn around and then periodically shoot the VR11. The hard part about getting to these high rounds was never really the rounds themselves. It was the setup and the difficulty during that, and it's the skill that goes into figuring how to set up that strat. Like something like Call of the Dead, the hard part is mainly going to come from those early rounds, where you have to strategize your points by shooting them in the leg and knifing the zombies to open the map up as fast as possible, since you got to get jugged, because without it, you're a 2-hit down. You got to hit the box to get the VR11, Matryoshka dolls, and a gun to kill George, and then you have to kill George multiple times over the course of like a dozen or so rounds to actually go past the perk limit and get all your perks, as well as trying to progress the rounds as fast as possible to not hit the reset timer or crash your game. Now obviously it's a lot more complicated than this, but look at the gameplay of an average BO6 high round, the average BO3 high round, and the high round strat on the hardest high round ever in COD Zombies. All three of these end up with the player eventually just kind of chilling. But why do we even feel a huge distinction between the difficulty of these? It's because it's hard to achieve those higher rounds when the early rounds are hard. It's why something like reducing the ammo count on your loadout and holding off on Wonderfizz until after round 25 are great changes to the difficulty that no one complains about, while something like boss spam on high rounds isn't. It's exactly the problem with someone like Duke Dennis just getting to round 50 on his first game. It's not that those high rounds are too easy, as much as it's the setup to get to those rounds was so easy that it allowed that to even happen in the first place. You know, people don't get to super crazy high rounds unless there's little to no resistance from the start of the game. You know, it's going down and the fear of that happening at any point and not knowing where stuff is, that stuff early on that starts from the very start of the game, that's where the difficulty comes from. If you play Shadows of Evil for the first time, you have no idea where Jug is or how to even get to it. It's a 3-hit down until you even find it. And then on Liberty Falls, you spawn in, you open up your map, you know exactly where it is and how to get to it. You've got reliable damage with your loadout gun, which you can buy ammo for, and you spawn with armor, so it's a 9-hit on round 1. Now, if we look back at the changes I had previously suggested in this video on how to make the game harder, they're all things for the early game or changes that affect the entirety of your run, not just the later rounds. Almost every single map in COD Zombies has an effective strat on high rounds. Whether it's spamming a specific trap, running a circle, or camping in a corner, stuff like that is just always going to be there. But what's important is that the strategy and skill you need to even get to that point, that is what should be difficult to achieve. So as an example, something like the Mangler injection strat. If we want to make that harder, you don't just spawn a shit ton of boss enemies on high rounds. You can remove it as a crafting item and have it only drop from the bosses or from the mystery box. Or you can remove it for the other two and do the vice versa and have it only be something that's craftable and that doesn't drop. Or as I've said before, just get rid of the invincibility frames you get so it takes more skill to use. These tweaks would affect that specific mechanic on every single round, not just the high rounds. Imagine if it was only craftable and it cost a ton of salvage. In order to get to the point where you can reliably buy that, you would have to save up your salvage and be super smart with it the entire game off round 1. Now that is how you're going to make stuff more difficult. And honestly, I do feel like they're finally understanding this. With something like the addition of jingle hells, as I mentioned earlier, you have those periodic freeze rounds which cause you to take shelter. And they also removed the arsenal machine, making it so that loadout guns are pretty hard to upgrade and would require you to do challenges and get keys in order to actually upgrade them. Or you would have to keep spinning the box and hope you finally get lucky. And if you were somehow able to get an ammo mod from like a challenge or something, it's gonna actually feel like a reward. And it's probably gonna take a while to even get the ammo mod you actually even want for that game. And actually, similar to what I suggested earlier in regards to the mutant injection, in this mode they actually took it one step further and are removing the crafting table. This means your equipment's gonna be way more valuable, and stuff like the Mangler injection, you're gonna have to get lucky from a drop or from hitting the box. And you're gonna have to hold on to it to only use it when you really need it, as you never really know when you're gonna get another. And instead of getting self-revives off the crafting table, you're gonna have to play smart, play safe, and use stuff like the quick revive dying wish augment to help protect you from dying until you get another self-revive drop off a zombie. It's like they're not removing the mechanics themselves, they're still in the game, but they're making them way harder to achieve on those early rounds, which is just gonna cause a butterfly effect to make every single round later a lot more difficult because you're not as set up as you would have been. This mode is essentially like a hard mode to Liberty Falls, and there's nothing about it that has anything to do with boss spam or boss health. And this shows not only that it's entirely possible for them to do, but something like this also being added kind of goes to show that they do understand this, and that it's likely something we'll see more of moving forward. And speaking of, the newest map, Citadelle actually did this super well. I've seen people complaining that, oh, this map's too hard, but that's because you actually have to strategize and think for a change. You know, to get to high rounds and counter the boss zombies consistently, you have to use stuff like the lightning incantation, which requires you to get a stamp for the sword, to then pick up the sword, and go and get 3 Tesla coil parts from all around the map, and then use those to charge your sword with lightning and get the lightning sword, which then afterwards you need to go get a horseshoe from a shack, and then take the cannon to spawn, and then get the electrified horseshoe from somewhere around the map, and then do a soul box and spawn and whack it with your sword, and boom, you got the lightning incantation for the rest of the game. But the lightning sword kind of sucks, so if you want a good run, you're gonna have to do a whole nother quest for a different sword, as well as strategize with your perks like melee macchiato, for example, to make your sword even better. Or you can even run something like Shadow Rift on a bullet weapon as well, with the big game augment on it to where you can one-shot elite enemies whenever it goes off. Or you could just use the stuff that's already in the map, like the flaming oil trap that will always one-shot amalgamations. This is what I'm talking about. Trying to get to high rounds without doing any setup shouldn't be easily doable. It should take stuff like this, investments and thought and strategy early on into your game. That is what you should have to do to get to those later rounds. And so genuinely, with all the changes made for the reveal of Black Ops 6, after the reveal based on our feedback, and even still being made currently a month into the game, it's so clear now more than ever how much Treyarch truly cares about this game. You know, as the devs, not everything they're gonna do is gonna be perfect. You know, us as the community or content creators, our ideas aren't gonna be perfect either. But the devs do want our feedback, and it's really up to us, the community, to kind of tell them what's good and what's not. But damn, them being able to actually own up to it when they're wrong and actively do their best to try and make the game as great as it can be, it really proves that the devs are just as passionate now as they've always been. With all that said, that's about it for me. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on difficulty in zombies? And do you agree with what I said, or do you disagree? Let me know down in the comments. And so if you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe or check out the videos on screen now. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.